Habit of victory. Alright. Time and time again, I have tried to get into and enjoy the Zucker operational designs. And this is one of the more modern variants. Each time, I find that they're more of a headache than they're worth for me. I'll try to be fair about. It's a very hard pipe to smoke, mainly because of the stem is too weak. It's a very cheap stem, so I gotta kind of rest it on my breast. There's a humongous amount of calculation involved in it, and the denser the combat forces available, the more it ends up being very clean smoking, by the way. But the more it ends up being this very large scheduling constraints problem. And that means that you've got to do a lot of obnoxious mathematics, just arithmetic, but a lot of it, to consider, hey, is this my best option? Is this my best option? Much worse than, trying to figure out, hey, can I get 2-to-1 on all of these attacks? Or, can I get a 3-to-1 here if I soak here? Those kind of problems are almost always very easy comparatively. Largely because of the numbers involved. If you've got a game with lots of stupid numbers, like 11 and 13 and all this, on the factors, yeah, those can get pretty annoying too. I still think this is harder. But I'm not absolutely certain. I haven't faced too many of those games that have lots and lots of different kinds of numbers on all the pieces and allow you to examine the opponent's pieces. Something like OCS has lots of different factors, but you're not supposed to look in the stack, so you're kind of guessing, hey, what am I hitting? What are my approximate odds? Here, though, you have your entire force near you, and this is true with all of the operational design games. And you have to try to balance out how to get as many strength points as you possibly can into the attack or into the general area where they can support each other and whatever. All right, we get this up. It looks classy. It doesn't work very well when I'm trying to do anything, and I always make the mistake of trying. So that's my big negative on this. There's a lot of picayune little rolls. However, they largely, I think, do a good job of expanding that core system to try to capture some sort of historical realities of combat in the era. So, once you started adding, the earliest game that I have of it is Napoleon at Bay, which was a shock to me the first time I played it. I said to myself, gee, this is one of them Zucker games, and I actually enjoy it. Now, I have given so many attempts over the years to like these, and I always feel like it's just going to take me a little bit more, and Ney versus Wellington is another game that I have this problem with, where it's just going to take me just a little bit more effort, and maybe I'll see it. And then one day I picked up a used copy of Napoleon at Bay after I had, the Avalon Hill and Victory Games, big ones, 1809, Struggle of Nations. And I was like, geez, this is cool. Well, the big difference is that one is lacking a lot of the added on rolls that add a little bit of detail and realism, if you would, to the design. What it's also lacking is the ability to really concentrate large amounts of force in one place, which means that you don't have as hard a constraint problem ever. The way the game plays out, it ends up being much, much simpler. Now, I had a lot of gripes about 6 Days of Glory, which tries to be a simpler version of this design. And I'm trying to think what really bugged me about it. Some of it was components, but there was definitely a headache factor to it, which didn't exist in Napoleon at Bay either. And it's kind of funny because Napoleon at Bay, I think, is the version that I have is pretty close to the original concept that Zucker had for these games. And it went in two directions after that. It went in the little micro game option, and I played this, and it wasn't like, oh, this is hard decisions. It was a matter of, it's just too small. It's like playing, some of those Victory Point games where there's 10 pieces on the board. And you're like, well, this isn't very exciting. There could be just 10 pieces on the board in a Zucker design, though, and it would still be interesting. Those guys have 3 pieces on the board per side, which takes some of the enjoyment out of, there's not a rich enough situation to really develop. There's just sort of a simple puzzle. Hey, how do I race to get here? What do I have to do? There's things to really love about the core system of this. The idea that you have this pool of operational points and you have to spend them in order to move your forces, but if you spend them, you're going to affect your attrition, and of course you won't have them later in the game as well. That face you with these really tough choices that maybe sometimes I don't like, but I can grow quite fond of it over in Napoleon at Bay, and even here it wasn't too disturbing. So then, this 2X system really isn't too different from the older, more chromy systems, 1809, Struggle of Nations. And I thought that maybe playing, this on this kind of open map board that this Habit of Victory has would be a similar sort of experience to the Napoleon at Bay experience, but I found totally not. Then you add the specific rules to this, and this is one of my biggest gripes. The exclusive rules to this game are much larger than the base rules. 30-something pages versus what feels like your normal Zucker, runs in at about a little under 20 pages. Reasonable set of rules. This replaces parts of it. Now, I hate when rule books do this with things like programmed instruction or something. Oh, yeah. Well, now we're going to teach you the complexities of this kind of movement, and we're going to take away your simplified abstract version that we gave you at first. I do not like when games do that. I would prefer they write separate rule books for the different games. The exclusive rules in here, other than a couple of pages, are largely meant to handle the campaign game, which is, of course, what I want to play, right? The little battle scenarios are just a few turns, and really all they are is a hard constraint problem. And, can you outmaneuver your opponent and out-calculate him? The difference in the campaign game from what the old operational Napoleonic stuff had is these cards. Now, they're not terrible once you get used to them. The way they work is you have an event which you have an option to trigger, and then you have this little table that tells you what attrition you suffer. So you always know what your attrition is going to be based on your card play, which, okay, I don't know if I really buy that, but you always have to take some sort of concessions, right? When or make certain concessions when you're looking towards a game, and maybe there's some great gameplay advantage. And it is kind of neat to know, oh, okay, I can move this far without attrition if I play this, that, and the other. So there's some interesting... you have more control in your decision making with the cards. I think it's too much control, but I'm willing to play along with that. The problem is that additional control adds to the constraint problem, right? You've got this other variable, and that variable can get quite large. In the game I was playing, the Russians had their entire deck as their hand. Now, that's ridiculous, but the way I play, that's how it turned out. Anyway. If you like the old versions of the game, you get a one-map game here that with some tinkering and tweaking with the rules, you can even play the campaign games without the cards. They try to say in here that, oh yeah, you should be able to do it. It's fine. Just, use the points, whatever. Yeah, there's a problem with that. There's certain portions of the game that actually require these cards. And what would have been nice, and maybe it exists somewhere, but I wanted to give this a shot with the cards, is to say, okay, well, here are some random event tables that make up for it. Another problem with the cards is that they don't exactly correspond to the same circumstances when you're playing, if you play the game with the battle scenarios, or if you were to play without the cards. Which is to say, well, first of all, you have too much control with the cards in comparison. But also there are some circumstances where, you could conceivably take attrition where you're not taking attrition. And I'm trying to think what else. I guess that's really about it. You also... you sort of control your movement. So with the cards, they have a movement allowance on them, which means that one of your cards gets played as this Oppant card, which is sort of, or something like that. Yeah, Oppant. Which is sort of it's going to serve as your card whenever you're making initiative rolls in the system. And what that means is all your units that move by initiative suffer from the same attrition results across the board, which again is a little different. There were a number of things that I identified as I was playing, and I'm not catching all of them here. All right, let's talk a little bit about the components. Overall, counters quite nice, easy to distinguish the different forces. That's a big bonus from the oldest of the games in this series, although the later ones kind of got you better at that. The rulebook is my biggest gripe, as is usual in Zucker games. They all seem to be a little bit too quirky and different from one another from the system, and it's absolutely ridiculous when your specific rules are, 50% longer than the standard rules and overwrite significant portions of them. That's a little goofy. I never once played with the Pursuit event table. It doesn't add a whole hell of a lot. It adds a little bit of randomness to the pursuits, which are already kind of random. I'm not going too much into the system here. I cover more of my feelings about the system as a whole, where I was more positive on it, which was the Napoleon at Bay, which was just such a shock the first time I played it, that I actually liked it. The fact that the rules are overwritten in the exclusive rules is just so disturbing to me. And then you have to piece in the cards themselves and their additional values. But then also there's some errata here that has to be pieced in that is a little different. And it makes it more difficult to approach the game. There's also a lot of little pieces of paper that I was fumbling through of all the times. And the sequence of play that you're provided doesn't necessarily work. It depends on sometimes there's things from one set of rules, sometimes from the other, mixed in together in here in a way that doesn't quite work. But again, it's easy enough to resolve that kind of issue. The Some of the player aids are just on paper, whereas others are on cardstock. I don't know. The leader sheets, a little better than what you had over in, a little better organized than what existed in Napoleon at Bay, but still kind of difficult to cope with. And I think, again, the all is lost save honor solution of using cards for the leaders is a bigger jump upward, certainly than using cards for the movement commands. This was a bold choice, I'll give it that, but it's one that I don't think, terribly works well. It makes the decision making in a game that was already heavily burdened in decision making just too heavy. Some errata on the reinforcement chart, not that big a deal, but I guess one of the biggest nice things about the game is it's got not quite the highest quality, but a nice textured map, very pretty. I had real worries that I wouldn't be able to read it, and that was harder early in the scenario when the map was further, when the parts of the map that were being played in were further away from me. But it overall, as the fighting got close to me, it became pretty easy to read. Not as easy as the old style map, but it is definitely a graphic improvement. The cards themselves, we get used to kind of poker quality cards, and these aren't quite. These are more cheap bridge quality, They're definitely paper cards. Probably sleeving them wouldn't do too much harm, although they shuffle well, so that's not too big a deal. Anyway, my overall impression is that this is just not my series, The good experience that I had over with Napoleon at Bay has just not been repeated with any of the other designs. This one is probably the most overburdened of all the designs that I've seen, although Struggle of Nations is up there with its tiny little hexes and its errata that are posed as questions, and ridiculous errata like, this counter has a 2-3 strength, is that correct? No, that's not. Just give me errata, don't pose it as questions, right? The errata is not complete that came in the box. Maybe there's some online. I know that there must be, because I made some marks in my sheet off an online resource, but I don't think it covered some of my questions, as is usually the case. Usually the errata is not complete. I wonder if all that many people actually play these games, or if a lot of the people who love them kind of just are more collectors of them than anything else. But if you do like the series and play it heavily, the cards do add a twist. And if you're very comfortable with the constraint problems of getting your forces together, the cards add an additional layer of difficulty to that, if that's what you want. It sure the hell isn't what I want. But, anyway, it did get easier as I went on. And I think if I played this very, very regularly, it would be less painful, but it still wouldn't necessarily be the most enjoyable. I think I would rather play games that didn't require me to do as much calculation and addition as this does. And there's always a counting problem as well. When you're counting the hexes to your command center and everything, I'm always having to recount those, the distance for commands and everything. I did that less in this because it was just easier in general, and I kind of forgot about it and probably played commands where I shouldn't. One interesting thing with this is it adds this concept of depots all over the board, which make it almost impossible to be out of supply range. One of the things I always liked about the game was that the center of operations kind of kept your army focused in one area. That's not the case anymore in this design. You can spread out and do a lot more movement. Probably, I think some of the games had more centers of operations. I know usually it's like there's one French center of operations and like multiple coalition ones, and this is no different. Well, I guess the French are given more flexibility by these depot towns, which means what they do is you don't have to play a card. You can't play a card out of them. You can't play an action out of them, a command point, but they keep your army in supply so that you're not taking terrible attrition for going out on a flanking maneuver or anything like that. Trying to think if there's anything else I really want to say about it. I don't know. I'm going to give the battle system a try at some point. I have a bunch of games from the newest battle system. I'll probably start with the old Last Battles. I have the TSR version of that. I don't have any of his old OSG stuff, but anyway. Once again, disappointing for me, but you get what you expect with these, and the cards, you could work around them if you really dislike them. And I don't think they harm the system all that much. I think they do detract a little bit from the realism of the game situation, though. They take away some of the randomness and put too much control in the player's hands. And that's, I guess, my view on them. I guess that's about it.